Good night. It's the 7th of September. It's about, the time is 10 o'clock, 10 p.m. And this is Enoch Burke, and more on Enoch Burke. Well, we've had a couple of really good days of weather, and it's a great chance for the harvest, and it really means I'll be deleting all my videos on straw, because now we'll have a reasonable supply of straw, thank God. I'd say that it's a bit too late for haymaking. I think that I don't know how they're going to manage for hay for horses and all that, but that's another day's work. Anyway, I had a very long day today. A few hitches cropped up. Had to get them sorted and going fast and hard, and a late lunch, and I felt a bit thirsty. So I popped into the local pub and I had my half one of whiskey and a couple of beers, and good nice frothy beers, and nothing like it when you're in the humour for it. In any event, home again safely, and just to add some thoughts before retiring to my slumber about this thing about Enoch Burke and this unusual situation that pertains. And it would be better if it could be resolved some way, but how it's resolved, I don't know. It will take the intervention of somebody with a great bit of negotiating skills. But I want to just give an example. In Ireland and in most of the English-speaking world, in all the English-speaking world, for example, land is divided up by means of maps. And if you buy a house or you buy a farm, there'll be a red mark around the boundaries. And that is the best evidence you have that the boundary is there, but it's not complete evidence. So if you buy a house and it goes through, and by right you should always get your maps fixed and sorted before you complete the sale. But it often does happen that people are in a house and they discover that the boundary that is naturally theirs and that everyone accepts as theirs is not the boundary on the map. Somebody drew the map wrong, or they drew the line in the wrong place. So I don't know, can you see? Probably can see here. That should be the line. And instead of that, the line is this way, or the line is wrong. Now, the reason of that is that the government, nor the solicitors, nor the legal system or anything else doesn't want to spend a big investment on mapping. And so what happens is somebody buys a house and the map is drawn out, and maybe wrongly done, maybe done by an architect or somebody who hasn't really surveying or ordnance surveying or mapping qualifications or topography or any of that. And they come along and they draw up the map, and it's sent off to the land registry, and it gets through the solicitors and everything, and that's it. So now you have it mapped wrong. So going back into olden times, you had the landlords. If you go into Griffith's Poor Law valuation, you'll see the lines on the map, and they were very, very good actually, but they're not exact. And so very often the line on the map was not actually in line with the real boundary, and they did tend to use the centre of drains as the real boundary, and sometimes it's the centre of roads, and there's all these kind of sub rules into it. But the way the law looks at it is, if the line on the map coincides with what everyone accepts locally as the boundary, fair enough, that's it. But the Statute of Limitations Act 1957 gives you 12 years to challenge any mistake on a map or any possession. What the law says is that if you're in possession of the land for 12 years or more, even though the boundaries, the line on the map says differently, you can claim adverse possession or squatter's rights, as we call it. And in its unusual form, it's where somebody takes over a plot of land and holds on to it for 12 years or more, and then they claim it altogether. And the reason the law is like that is you should look after your land and claim your rights within 12 years. Otherwise, you'd have people coming in now into the courts of Ireland and Britain, and they'd be trying to fix up some land dispute that took place in 1875. The courts couldn't deal with it, so you're supposed to chase up your rights and your property rights. So if you want to break the line on the map, you've got to show that that line is not the accurate line, that that is not the proper line. And you've got to show that you're in possession of the land that's in the other person, your neighbour's property, for 12 years or more. Or you can get the neighbour to sign. And in several cases, people have come to me worried about a line on a map, or they got a letter from their neighbour's solicitor to say the neighbour was worried about the line on the map. It wasn't right. And I'd go up and look at it. I'd look at the map and I'd say, you know what, you should agree. Get the map, get it fixed and pay a bit towards the other person's lawyer. And I'd have a look at it. And so you'd have the line fixed and you get it right. When the people had realised that their neighbour wasn't trying to take their land, they just wanted a definite line in the right place and get that sorted, there was no big problem. Do you understand that now? I hope you understand that. What I'm really getting at there is that the norms with land law is possession and the map. It's not the map and possession. What was perceived, what was agreed down through the years, where did people go in and out of gaps and all of that, and that will carry a certain amount of weight in the courts. So how is that connected to Enoch Burke? Well, we leave Enoch Burke sort of out of it because this is a principle of law irrespective of who the parties are. And if you have a situation where the norms of society can be changed for the employees of a company, then you've got to look at that very carefully. The way it works with the land law is the map is right until you have to, till it's wrong. And the reason the law says that is that if you were to have the line on the map accurate and accepted by the courts as 100% right, you'd have to have both parties present. You'd have to have Mary Finn and Johnny Muldoon, and they'd have to be there, and their architects and solicitors would have to be there. And so the line would have to be agreed, and they'd say, right, that's the line. If that were done, and there were affidavits to that effect, that line on the map would be deadly good. But if it's only a solicitor office drawing up the best they can and sending it up to get it registered so you get your mortgage through, the line might not be accurate. Do you understand that? So there's a thing called the norms of society, that the way it looks on the field is probably the right way. There was a legal case down in Dower one time where Lizzie Boogie, was at law with her neighbour, and there was an arguing over a fence that came down one side and then went across a shuck or a drain and down here. And they were looking at the maps, and she says, there's no need to look at the maps, you can look out the window. And the land was visible from the court in Dower. You could see the field from the court room through the window. So anyway, I digress a bit. Now the thing is, if you take anyone in employment of the state or a private company, if you take a teacher who's employed to teach kids, if you take a school bus driver, supposing I want to be a school bus driver and I apply to be a school bus driver, if you're going to apply strange and unusual circumstances, then you got to think it out clearly and have the law made to suit that. Now in the case of Enoch Burke, apparently a boy believed he was a girl. He said, I'm transgender, or I'm a girl, or whatever it is. And if he believed he was a woman, then the right thing would be to call him she or her. So that when you'd refer to him, you'd say, that's her. But they wanted an in-between one, they. So who decided they was to be the pronoun? Somebody posted on my video that it was some lady that is gone from that school. I don't know that. I don't want to name because I don't know. I don't name people. I consider taking that down because it might be wrong, but we'll leave it for the moment till we try and fish out what it was. But in any event, somebody decided you were to call them they. Well, why didn't they decide to call them the moon? Or we'll say Chuck Berry, or Bob Dylan. I mean, why is the pronoun they chosen? Because they is neither he nor she. But who decides that that's what they are? How do we know the young boy mightn't want to be called her? He might want to be called by a girl's name, and they might be objectionable to him. Do you get the point I'm making? So what if I'm the bus driver And I'm driving along, and next September there comes in a student, and I get instructions to say this student, a little boy we'll say, believes he's a frog. And instead of walking in on the bus in the normal way, he insists that he hops on to the bus and goes down on all fours and hops up on the bus and hops down the middle of the bus, and all the kids is laughing at him. And I'm supposed to give them a clip on the ear to stop them laughing at him and making little of him. I'm supposed to look after his parity of esteem. And I'm supposed to do all this. This is something I never signed up for. I signed up to do the usual things. Right? What if then they send in a girl and she believes she's a butterfly and she wants to swim or to flap down, and she wants 2 seats so she can flap her wings and do all this? What am I supposed to do there? What if the other students sit down beside her and she objects? The point is, it's up to the people who make the rules to decide how they're going to handle this. If they're going to employ staff to deal with these people, then they need to get the staff's agreement. They need to put it on the advertisement. School bus driver wanted, must be prepared to deal with alternative lifestyles, including children who believe they're frogs, or girls who believe they're butterflies, or snakes, or mice, or rats, or anything else. Then there's some say some kids believe they're cats. Because they're cats. So they're teaching them in the schools now, up in Meath, I believe, to eat insects. So if I'm the teacher of the school up in Dunshaughlin, I'm supposed to bring in the insects and give good example and eat a couple of wasps myself and then give them to the kids. If that is to be the way society is going, and that is to be it, surely the staff have to be at least trained how to deal with it. And if that training or the workload is extra, they have to be paid extra. And selective staff should be chosen to deal with these particular kids. Of course, this would be a ridiculous burden on the education system and very unfair both to the teachers, to the bus drivers, and to the other children in the school who have to deal with this laughable, ridiculous thing. Long ago, kids got their food, they got their needs done, they got their education, and a bit of health, a bit of medical, and all of that. And now they want to have the whole society give them notice and look after them because they want to be frogs, butterflies, or mice. So you see, it's if the state wants to do that, that's all right. If the state wants to allow somebody come into that school, or any school, could be Roscommon, could be Dublin or Cork, and start dictating that boys who want to be girls be called they, and naming the pronouns and educating all the staff on all these things, where does it stop? It's like the mapping. If you insist on the map being accurate, you have to allow both parties to be present when the map is drawn up, and there has to be forms signed to say that they've duly checked the map against the reality on the ground, and that they've got professional advice from an architect or a surveyor, possibly an engineer, and there would probably need to be a certificate from each party's engineer to agree that this is it. And that had all cost hundreds. It had delayed the registration of property and had affect housing. Can you imagine, in the current housing crisis, if the government did come up with a solution to the housing problem, and we had to deal with this ridiculous situation where the maps was to be put through all of this with engineers and everything, you'd slow up the whole thing. So you cannot logically bring in all these mad woke stuff and just force them on people. And this is the very same as the Greens and the windmills and the solar panels. They want to bring them in without carrying out the proper strategic environmental assessment under Directive 201/42/EC. And I suspect that they begin to realise they've made a colossal mistake in not listening to me. Ryan is going, Eamon Ryan is leaving altogether. So they want to do it on the cheap. They don't want to do these assessments. They want to do it on the cheap. They want to introduce all this stuff as a kind of a social experiment, and they want to do it on the cheap as well, so that there's no one analyses or checks what all the ifs and buts there are to bringing in this policy. what are boys and girls entitled to call themselves. If you say a boy is entitled to say, I'm a girl, or I'm not, I'm neither, what category do you put them into? And it's the same with the Olympic sports. I mean, what is a boy and what's a girl? So when you go into this category, you cannot throw the weight of it over on ordinary teachers, ordinary bus drivers, ordinary dentists. It's for the state and the school to assess all this. If you want to throw your windmills up on people and have them awake all night, you have to do the proper assessment. And the European Court of Human Rights have ruled in the case C-2419 that you have to have the proper assessment of the wind energy guidelines, with the result that I have now the ball at my foot to pull down every wind farm in Ireland, costing billions, which I intend to hopefully do if I have my health. So you see that you have to assess and think up the consequences of what you're doing. And if you do that, you mightn't do it at all. And what we get in these cases, like Enoch Burke, we get someone who has to take no responsibility for their actions. If the post underneath is right, and I'm not sure if it is this person did this and then humped off somewhere else, leaving this mess behind them. If there was proper assessment of these things, there would be guidelines for school headmasters to follow, or headmistresses, and they couldn't bring in this without putting it through the proper process. Have I explained my position? I'm over 20 years preaching that eventually the strategic environmental assessment will come back to haunt the government, haunt the government for building all this junk and no assessment carried out and having it all illegal. Unfortunately for them, if I have my health, I intend to pull them all down and make them see the whole lot being pulled down. That maybe you might say I'm vicious, I don't care. They didn't do it right, and that's as simple as that. And it's the same with imposing this on Enoch Burke. If the Department of Education wanted to allow all this gender stuff and woke stuff, they should have considered it. They should have had a bit of a meeting. What are the implications? What are the likely implications for people who are strongly religious? I mean, we were always religious in Ireland. We always had religious schools. So what is the implications? What is someone going to do if they're forced to call a boy they? And they don't believe that's in accordance with their religion. What if, for example, it's a Muslim school and the Muslim teacher is there, and a Muslim teacher, and he's teaching something and teaching the Quran for half an hour, the Muslim Bible or whatever you call it, don't hold me to it, the Muslim holy book, and then he goes on and he has to call a boy a they, and this could be repugnant to the religion. Has that been worked out and thought of it? So it's up to the people who run the show to put their grey matter together, their brains together, and decide what's acceptable and what isn't. And they can't just say whatever works out, whatever some loony down in Galway or Kilkenny comes up with. And sure, if they say the boy is a mouse, well, sure, that's all right. If they say the girl is a butterfly, that's all right. Give her 2 extra seats. And if they say that if a boy wants to be a frog, well, sure, that's all right too. Sure, let him hop along, and let the driver hop along. What if he hops into the driver's seat? Where does it end? What are the parameters? You see, they want it on the cheap. They want to have it done by experiment. They want to flatten Ireland with windmills and solar panels. And sure, if they don't work, sure, it doesn't matter, sure, it doesn't count. Do you get me drift? They want it done on the cheap. The courts will not accept maps because maps are done on the cheap. If maps were to be done properly, they'd be done very expensively. And that would choke up the whole thing. They want it on the cheap. They want to bring in this woke stuff on the cheap, throw it out there. And the proof of that is that Roderick O'Gorman said about the referendum on marriage and the meaning of marriage and the woman in the home and her status in the woman in the home. I don't know what it means, but I'm sure the courts will figure it out. And Catherine Martin said virtually the same, even though the judge who was over the referendum commission disagreed. Do you get me point? Have I made a fair argument? Now, folks, I'm a bit slurred. I hadn't much drink. I only had a couple of pints and a half one of whiskey. But I might be a bit, but it doesn't really matter. You note that I don't get too high. Just think about that. Do you see now what I'm saying? They want it on the cheap. They want a cheap job done. They want to use all this social experimenting to give them a bit of a thrill, And we have a man in jail tonight for just saying, look, that's out of the question. I'm not going along with that. And who among us wouldn't do the very same? Who do you think I would, as a bus driver, treat a lad who says he's a frog jumping around the bus and let him away with it? Did anyone think that's the case? And how did we do for 300 or 400 years? How did the species survive for 1,000 years where anyone who thought he was a frog had nowhere to turn? Had nowhere to hop? Or any woman who thought she was a butterfly, well, she could butterfly around the garden, but she didn't go into school and start disrupting the class, and you didn't have people claiming they were mice, or you didn't have teachers serving up wasps and blue bottles to the children and having to eat them themselves. None of this went on long ago. This is a lunatic ideology. All to do with the Greens is lunatic. They're lunatics. Will they get any vote the next time? I doubt it. But then Fine Gael has new laws as well. They're fully more or less along with this. And so is Fianna Fáil. And someone just posted there about Fine Gael, Sinn Féin. Sinn Féin? Oh no, we're not so bad. I don't know. Mary Lou McDonald dressed up in the women's hijab in a religion that suppresses women. I was in Muslim countries, and women dare not wear fancy clothes or anything, and they'd pull back their black cloak and they'd show other women they bought a new pair of jeans or something, and they'd look at it, oh, they're lovely, and then they'd close up again. That's what Mary Lou McDonald is supporting. In any event, have I made a cogent case and for good debate? It's my position. It's up to the state and the people who vote in, the politicians of the state, to bring in whatever social change is needed. We did vote, the people voted for the marriage equality, that wasn't a problem, and bring in whatever social change is needed, but to assess it and see how it compares and see how it impinges on the rights of others, and that those others are staff, but they're also parents. What right has the parents to decide what happens to their kids? Should a teacher who comes into a school dictate to parents what should happen to their children? And it's going to the stage that they'll have no say. And it's going to the stage in some woke parts of the world where the state is thinking of taking the kids from the parents because they won't agree with this LGBTQ and gender blockers and puberty blockers and castration of boys at young age with chemicals and all of this. That's the mess it is. And it's unfortunate that it's come to Ireland. I'd like to feel that the rest of them get on with it over there in mad California, but that's the way it's going, and we do have a teacher in prison tonight. The reality is, if all of the teachers of the country stuck with their guns, there'd be more of them in prison. And what I don't know is it the case that Enoch Burke is just unfortunate that the school he was teaching in had to employ some woke loony? Is that the case? I don't know. But who allowed the woke loony to do it? And I say, if it's a taxpayer-funded school, the woke loony should not be allowed to ply their trade. If they want to push this stuff, set up their own school and do whatever has to be done, do their own teaching. Do not force their will on other people. If I was a headmaster of a school, I'd insist on good teaching of mathematics, numeracy, literacy, English, Gaelic, and geography, and the basics, and a bit of counting, and teach them how to count, and a bit of science, and a bit of civil what do you call it, civics, and a bit of that, and that'd do. And if they got all that and got it very well, and if they got a bit of woodwork and metalwork done into the bargain and technical drawing, they'd be well fit for whatever happened. And if they go out on the world and they want to change their gender, there's nobody stopping them. I think that is a perfectly reasonable situation to take, a very reasonable stance to take. And please excuse me if my voice is a bit spurred. Sure, what about it? I earned my couple of pints, and that's it. It'll be next week till there's any more. Comment underneath. Bye. We'll see you back. I hope you enjoyed the video, and good luck. Thank you.